Hey everyone, and welcome back to Todos Santos. This is episode number 15, and today we're going to be continuing working on the downtown area by filling in some buildings, throwing down a few different details, and generally just trying to flesh it out a little bit. So I should probably clarify, I said a couple episodes ago that for the downtown we're going to be moving away from the San Juan influence, which is sort of true in that I wanted to go for a more cosmopolitan kind of city that could fit into a lot of places. That being said, I'm not going to put anything down that totally would not fit in San Juan or any other similar kind of city. Or at least that's what I'm going to try to avoid doing to the best of my abilities. Obviously, I'm not 100% sure on whether any given building would fit in a place like that, but I'm going to try my best. And really what we're going to be doing is picking and choosing some different inspiration in terms of what buildings we place, what the road layout is like. And mostly I just wanted to do that to just increase the amount of freedom I had to work on this area because I wanted it to look really nice and cohesive and also have it not take 20 episodes to make. So that's really what we're doing. It's totally going to fit with our Puerto Rican theme. And then after this series of episodes, when we kind of get this main part of the downtown all finished and detailed, we're going to be moving on to another area, and we're going to really double down on the Puerto Rican influence. I've been watching a lot of videos of people driving through San Juan, which is really cool. I've been doing a lot of looking around on Google Maps and Google Earth, which is a really handy tool for this sort of build. So we have all that to get to work on. So let's build the Skyline. As I've been rambling on so far, you've been watching me pick and choose some skyscrapers from a little palette I put together on the edge of the downtown area. And I wanted buildings that were mostly white, concrete, glass, that sort of look. That seems to be the sort of thing you see in San Juan going around on Google Maps. And now we're pulling back and zooming in with the cinematic camera mod to see it from different points around the city, or of what will eventually be the city. And I think that's important when you're making a skyline because you want it to make a good impression from a lot of different angles. And of course, this isn't going to be the only place with skyscrapers. They're going to be all over the city. They're going to be clusters and then some just kind of on their own in little weird places. But this is sort of the main financial district, I guess would probably be the right term for it. And that's it for the Skyline, really, for this episode at least. Of course, in the future, we'll be adding tons of details, moving some buildings around, adding more buildings, filling everything in. But that's it for now, and we're moving on to detail this road. This is the main road through the financial district, and I laid down this big, wide 8-lane road, 4 lanes per side, with the intention of covering up most of the lanes in order to make it so at intersections you could have protected left and right turns, so that at the intersection you have a left turn, 2 straights, and a right turn, and then beyond the intersection there are 2 lanes, and that allows us to get some cool traffic patterns, and it also is a pretty good capacity, I think so, combined with the frontage road system that we have. It's pretty efficient overall, with some tweaks to the traffic lights and everything, of course. And we also add in, like you're seeing here, some dedicated right turn lanes to side roads, bus lanes, and those are the types of things that the base game really doesn't like to let you make. And even with all these mods and assets, it can be a bit of a challenge and definitely time consuming, but it just adds so much detail and realism. So I really wanted to focus on that sort of thing for this main avenue. Of course, we're not going to be going into this much detail for the whole city, but I'm going to pick and choose some focus points such as this one and really put a lot of work into them to make them look good and also function. And of course, there's always time to put down some lines and signs for an intersection. That adds a lot of detail, and again, this is one of those focus points where your eye just naturally goes toward the big intersections, and if you have a timed traffic light and some decals and signs, And I think that's one of the coolest aspects of building a city in this modded version of the game, is getting to see that really detailed, realistic, and functional aspect. And back to how we're doing this avenue for a second. What I'm doing is just taking these King Leno curb networks, which are great, and also save on props, of course, which is handy, and drag them over the lanes where I don't want cars to go, because there's a median in the way. And then in Traffic Manager, go in and you can just simply ban vehicles from those lanes, because you can do a lane-wise vehicle restriction. And additionally, as a fail-safe, you can go in and adjust where the cars can drive from each node, like which lane change they can make, and just keep them from going out of the median. Of course, this can result in problems if you force cars into certain lanes or don't allow them to go into other lanes that they might need to arrive at a destination. And I've definitely run into some problems with that with bus lines and stuff, but it's not too bad, and I'm always able to find what the issue is. So I think it's worth having that double layer of protection to make sure that the cars don't end up driving through the median, which is not a good look for a realistic city. Or maybe it is, I don't know. So now I'm fiddling with this traffic light here, and just to give you the long and short of it, my usual process for doing a time traffic light is first of all just getting a series of lights down and set up, and that will generally mean allowing the main road to get some straight traffic through, and then left pocket turns, and then just alternate that and go over to the other crossroad where they do the same things. And of course, always allowing right turns if you want to have right turns on red. And then just letting it run and seeing how it works and adjusting the lengths of the cycles as needed. One of my favorite things about making an avenue this way is that you're able to do these dedicated right turn lanes even for little side roads, which if you don't have traffic that's turning there can back up the rest of the traffic as they wait to turn right. So those dedicated right turn lanes really help, both in terms of traffic and of course in realism. Okay, so I'm quickly going to plop down some street vendors and some hedges, make a little bit of a landscaped area to fill in this gap here. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. Enjoy the segment. Welcome back. I couldn't help myself but put down a few signs here in this area where that lane ends on the right. I just thought it felt like it needed a little bit of signage there. So now we're going to start making a bus line, and basically the point of this is so that we can know where the bus stops are going to be so that we can decorate them. And also, of course, we can fit them into this scheme we've got going with the avenue. Now you can see here's one of those instances I was talking about where messing with the lane restrictions and the lane changes can mess you up later on. I had a lot of trouble getting this bus to go to the right spot, but I did eventually get it. So now that we've got that all set up, we're gonna populate it with some buses and see where they go. And this specific bus line that runs through the downtown is eventually going to be sort of an express bus route, I guess, so it doesn't stop, every block or anything like that. It goes through the downtown, takes a few stops. It'll eventually stop at the big bus hub that we plop down. And then it goes down the freeway. It actually takes the freeway out of downtown, and it'll stop at some of the various neighborhoods and other areas that we'll be building. And that's going to we end up with a gap sort of between the light rail that goes along the shoreline to the north and the metro line that eventually heads south. And so this express bus line is going to fill that gap and manage to get all those people from the rest of the city that we're eventually going to build into the downtown area. And you can see a nice little angle there of the downtown as the bus comes back. That's kind of cool. And then I may have mentioned this before, but if you see me placing down these bus stops, these are assets that I put together in the asset editor from various props that individually didn't really work for the style of the city. So what I did is I put together a custom bus shelter asset with a couple ads and some benches and a trash can, just things. Oh, and also a light and a bus schedule on the more urban styled ones. And I made an array of those to fit different situations, such as more urban, more rural, more suburban, that sort of thing. And it's just a building that I plopped down next to the bus stop, and you can drag it around, move it where you want, and it's mostly for decoration. People don't actually stand there other than just coincidentally from when they're waiting at the bus stop anyway. But I think that adds a lot of detail and really kind of fleshes out the bus system, which in the base game doesn't really have a lot of detail added. So I just wanted to go through and add that. And then we're also adding in these bus pullouts, and these also add a lot of detail to the bus system as the buses are driving through and pulling into them. And of course, they're also necessary for this style of avenue that we're building, because if we didn't build those, then they would just pull into the curb network, which obviously doesn't really make any sense. So we just had to go through and add these little spots, and you can control the size of the segment where they actually pull in by just creating new nodes on either end, and then with Traffic Manager going in and making sure that they are allowed to actually turn into those lanes and then turn out. One major benefit to making your bus stops this way is that the buses actually pull all the way out of the line of traffic when they're picking up and dropping off their passengers at a stop. And that way they don't make the traffic get all backed up because they do spend a lot of time at these stops. They'll drop people off, pick people up, and then they'll just sit there for a while. And that can be bad news for traffic. So it's nice to have these little pullouts, I think. And the base game does actually make pullouts when you make bus stops, of course, but they don't always pull all the way out of traffic, especially with modded roads that are a little skinnier. So this is just another way to have more control over what the buses are actually doing. And in the end, that's what this game is really all about. So one thing that I noticed now that I'm watching this footage back is that I really didn't do any left pocket turns, which I think I could have done and probably should have done just to give cars easier access to the side roads. But I'm not too worried about it. We'll have plenty of time in the future to do similar things in other parts of the city, so I probably won't go back and change too much about this avenue, but it's definitely something to think about in the future. Okay, so I'm going to let you finish watching me put together this avenue. I'll be back in a couple minutes. I hope you enjoy this segment. See you on the other side. Hey there! You can see me putting together another bus stop here, and I wanted to go through for a few of the specific bus stops, and this happens all over the city. We've done it a little bit in the Old Town area as well, and just kind of integrate these bus stops into the environment like they've actually been added in and tacked on to these buildings that already exist as this bus system is built and expanded and new lines are added. So we put that little partition there just to give it its own little space. So it's like they're adding in these public areas right in next to these private buildings and just trying to kind of delineate them from one another. And here's another example of that. We have this right on this pedestrian promenade here, which is something we'll go more detail into in the next episode when we go through and detail some of this area and fill in some of the gaps. And now we've moved on to the end of the kind of newer, nicer part of the avenue, and I wanted to use this intersection as like the transition between the more recently paved stuff. You can see the, all this darker asphalt that we have here. And then on the other side of the intersection, you can see the lighter pavement that's had more time to just get worn down and faded. And we'll put some details into that in later episodes. And here you can see how we're setting up some of these dedicated right turn lanes, just quickly doing that. And then, sorry, this is jumping back and forth a little bit, but we're back to the bus stop and we're just making room for the bus to pull in there to this little stop we've added to the promenade. These curb networks are great because they fit in perfectly with the associated props. So when you have all these gaps between networks, when you're lining them up like this, you can just fill them in with the little props. And so as a result, the prop count for this avenue is pretty low, honestly, compared to how it would be without using these networks. Now with these intersections, we're just gonna copy and paste them with Move It, which is such a great feature. I remember the days before that was part of the mod, and it was still a fantastic mod, but that feature just makes it so you can get so much more detail all over your city. So we're copying and pasting and then just going through and making sure all the lines and arrows line up right and make sense for how the traffic is going to actually flow. And by the way, having these turn arrow decals repeat a few times in each dedicated turning lane, I think is kind of a nice realistic detail that I seem to notice pretty much everywhere. So I just wanted to make sure that that got put somewhere in the city. And we're quickly going to decorate this little bus stop. And don't worry, this area is going to be filled with all the pedestrian promenade details you can think of in a later episode. And now we're just going to throw on the last few lines and arrows to get this thing all detailed. Now we're going to move on to my favorite part. We're going to put down some signs to make sure that everyone knows where to go. And if you ever notice me like missing some road signs or putting down road signs where they don't make sense, let me know and I'll try to adjust in the future because I really want to get that aspect of this build right. So any information you have on that sort of thing, I would love to hear it so that we can improve the city. And mostly what we're focusing on are these turning lane signs that tell you, right lane must turn right, left lane must turn left, that sort of thing. And of course, we're copying and pasting with Move It. And what that allows you to do is basically just make one template and then you can put it anywhere you want. As we approach the end of the episode, we're going to put these do not enter signs there, which I think is pretty important because that's going to be a major area for one-way traffic. And then we're going to finish it off with some palm trees in these hedged off areas. And I just thought that was a nice entrance into the city from the freeway. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Todos Santos. I can't wait to see you on the next one. Adios.